Greetings everybody, welcome to English Language Development Week 9. I can hardly believe that we are past the halfway mark in our class together. So great job with our concepts maps this week. I've had a chance to look at some of those and I'm already very impressed with how thorough and detailed you are as class members. Again, I apologize for the Blackboard issues. I thank you for your flexibility and your patience and working through that and persevering. So what I can suggest to you is that as changes are made, please keep an eye on the announcements. I regularly update those. So take a look there, and that will override any statement that might have already been made in the assessment rubrics on Blackboard. So that's just a helpful hint for you, is to keep an eye on that piece. So this week we resume our discussion, and this is going to be led by Andrea, Group 1, Emily, Group 2, and myself in Group 3. And we're going to go back to our original groups, so different than what we did this week with the concept maps. You'll be working with the classmates you started with at the beginning of the semester. A couple things in the discussion. I think it's going really well. I'm really impressed with how your discourse and your vocabulary is changing as you're learning about these new constructs and concepts and applying that in your responses within the forum. A couple things. One of the things we want to do is avoid assumptions, which we could regard as judgments. And what I've done is I've sort of provided you with a general example here. So when you go to post something, this is something that you can have in the forefront of your mind. An assumption is something, an assumption is, I think that the use of the L1 is okay, but only for social purposes, all right? So that's an assumption because there's not anything really backing that up. So a different way to maybe say that, which is fine because we want you to put that out there, is I am having a hard time understanding the author's argument about the use of L1 in schools. To me, this is so different from what I've been told and taught before. So if this is the case for you, that would be a different way to say it. And you're not saying that you are agreeing or disagreeing with the author, you're just saying you're having a hard time sort of digesting that and you're needing some processing partners for that. So that's a different way to put out some of the things that might be difficult for you as far as belief and pedagogy about maybe what you've been historically told or taught. So also this week is a journal reflection, and this is an individual exercise, and the journal is related to your concept map, so you'll be reflecting on the content that you've put together there. I originally had it due midweek, but due to the complexities with Blackboard, I've extended that until Tuesday of next week at 11:59. So really you've got two semi-deadlines this week. The first will be, of course, your discussion question on Thursday, that your first post is in there by Thursday, and that your last ones are posted by 1 o'clock on Sunday evening. And then the journal reflection will be due a few days after that. So a couple of things as we move into ELLs in the secondary setting. I wanted to share this example with you. I've not completed the full geography map here of Asia, but let's say the topic is Asia and labeling the different countries of Asia in a geography class. This might be something you'd see in a 6th grade room, possibly a 5th grade room, but let's say the exam is asking students to identify and label the countries with their related shape and geography. So you can see here that we have a lot of invented spelling, but I'm able to look at that and know that they're saying China. I know that they're saying Japan, India, and Nepal. But let's see what kind of grade this English language learner received on this exam. Oh, they got an F. So my question is, did the student fail English or geography? Because if I look at the geography content, they have followed the content objectives and the content expectations. And if I know that this student is a level 2 student, I'm probably going to be okay with some invented spelling, which would mean I would not take off points for spelling. And I know this is difficult because we always regard ourselves as language teachers and content teachers concurrently. It doesn't mean that we don't offer them feedback about their spelling, but do we penalize them for using invented spelling when really what we're after is their mastery of geography? So that's something that I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we embark into the secondary area where we're getting very, very honed in onto content. So the other thing that you'll be discussing this week related to Valdez's work is the complexity of a student by the name of Alyssa and what sort of content she has access to or doesn't have access to. And so I wanted to sort of put this together in a table to sort of help you crystallize this piece that is frequently experienced by many English language learners, even ELLs here within Indiana. So one of the things we see with Alyssa is her whole complexity about her algebra assignment. So a student like Alyssa may have something like this. So she has an ELL class as a secondary support for algebra. That might be a study hall, might be an ELL period, but she's in a regular general education algebra class. But the challenge for her, even though she may be a level 4 or is recently exited, is there's a great deal of linguistic complexity. And so it's not just about numbers, which is frequently what we hear about math, is that, oh, they'll do well in math because it's not language-based. Well, we can't really say that about science and mathematics at the high school anymore because it is very language-based and there still is that language piece in there. But the linguistic complexity goes up, and if those concepts are not well modeled with good scaffolded language strategies, then that student is probably going to struggle. The alternative is to have an ELL sheltered algebra class, meaning the student is with all ELLs with a teacher who is trained in sheltered ELL. And I should say sheltered is sheltering the content, not the students. That's what it's intended to do, but you can see in some cases it does isolate them from their classmates. But if they're in an ELL sheltered algebra classroom, and they're not in a general education algebra classroom and the ELL class is a substitute, then there's more linguistic simplicity, which does not scaffold them into higher levels of linguistic complexity. So here's sort of the continuum of difficulty and the challenges of doing one or the other, and really what is a good hybrid of both of those scenarios. So this is typically what we see in secondary settings based on sort of a continuum of levels 1 through 5, is that they start out with ELL support only, and then they move into content plus ELL support, and they move into content only. And the thinking is that once students reach this level of level 4, that they're just not going to need any of this. But what we do know is that ELLs spend most of their time at the higher levels of English proficiency at level 4, but it's the least likely time for them to receive support when that linguistic complexity is starting to amp up, which accounts many times for achievement stabilizing or declining during the secondary years. And that's some of the data that I shared with you earlier this semester. So one of the things that we often talk about, and Valdez gets into this in a little bit of this in chapter 6 as she talks about students with exceptional needs. But this is something that the exceptional needs things connected me with. If we look at an accommodation, let's say that we do this. Or actually, let's just say there's no support whatsoever. So step 1 is instruction, and let's imagine that this is a science lesson offered traditionally in a lecture format. Step 2 is assessment. Step 3 is a grade. And step 4 is, oh gee, all my ELLs failed this, I think I'll reteach it, or have somebody else reteach it on my behalf. All right? So if we offer an accommodation, if we don't offer an accommodation, then it sort of goes like this. Poor comprehensible input or teaching done in English, everybody gets the same assessment, English-only kids and English language learners. ELLs does poorly because original instruction was not comprehensible. And so what is really being assessed? English or science? All right, so let's keep going and let's look at this with an accommodation. So conceivably an accommodation well done will achieve a similar result or a better result to what we see here on this slide where there's nothing being done. So here we go, poor comprehensible input, poor teaching, done in English, different assessment for ELLs. L1 use is okay, use of graphic organizers, they can use visuals. So in lieu of doing a particular test, they're given a different test. But look what happens here. Everybody would think that, oh, well, the next step is, oh, well, they have an opportunity to do better because they have all these tools at their disposal. But look at this. ELL does poorly because original instruction was not comprehensible. So what is really being assessed? So I think the big thing is that if you have poor instruction to begin with, poor input to begin with, then what would it mean to receive an accommodation? That may give you different tools, but if those tools weren't originally used, then students won't know how to apply those. It would be the same for you and I if we were taken to, let's say we were all taken to India, and let's say none of us know Hindi or Gujarati, depending on where we are in India, and we are taken to a classroom and taught a science concept in Hindi, and let's say nothing was done for us. We probably wouldn't do very well. However, if we received an accommodation where we got extra time, we could use English, we could use a graphic organizer, what if the teacher didn't use that from the get-go? My argument would be is that if we've had poor instruction, even an accommodated assessment is not going to meet our needs. I always told my teachers that if you're accommodating the exam, you probably are too late. You always need to look at instruction first, assessment second, and let the circle go in that pattern. So one of the people that I've talked about before in the forum in one group was the work of Jamal Abedi, and his claim is translating test items into a student's L1, oh pardon my typo there, has been found to have a limited impact on performance if the instruction is not also furnished in the student's L1. And you can see the citation down there. So I think that's really, really key, is that quality input, quality assessment, quality feedback, learning occurs. English and content. So those are some things to keep in mind as you begin your discussion this week. And then after we close out Module 3 this week, Module 4 will be beginning. That is already posted, so you can begin to take a look at the content that is forthcoming. Have a great week. That's it for Week 9 English Language Development.